Hi, friends. Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Clouds Edge to Edge Transformation. I'm your host, Shankar Hemadi, and it's always nice to talk to people who have done some unique things in the industry. Here we have today Sagar Pushpala. And Sagar, tell us a little bit about your background, and then we have a lot to talk about today.
Thanks, Shankar. Always a pleasure to interact with you. I've known you on and off the field, so to speak. I've known you personally as a friend, and then we came together to the industry and started to interact quite a bit more. So let me start a little bit about where I came from and what my journey has been in the semiconductor side. So after my undergrad degree, I came in for grad studies, and after that, AMD hired me out of school. My very first job in Sunnyvale in a wafer fab. So I was a wafer fab engineer, and I actually started in what they call an off shift. I wasn't an 8 to 5 engineer. I was a midnight to 8 a.m. engineer. So they threw me to the wolves and said, go figure out how to go solve problems on the floor. That's kind of where I started. So I started in manufacturing, and then I stepped myself into various technology areas and R&D projects as well. But as you know, in the 80s, the wafer fab industry started to move out of the Bay Area. And as a result, fewer and fewer fabs ended up being in the Bay Area. But one nugget area, which I spent time with was in the analog world, where the technology and design interactions were much, much tighter. So you literally had to own your own fabs. Fast forward to current times, you look at TI, for example. TI owns their own analog fabs. So analog wafer fabs, technology, and design are very, very tightly linked. So it's not completely science yet in analog. There's a piece of art in analog design as well, right? And it still continues to today. So I moved through various analog companies from National Semiconductor to Maxim Integrated. And all these companies are now been acquired by larger entities like TI and ADI and others. And of course, I did Intersil. Intersil got acquired by Renesas. So you can tell there's a lot of consolidation taking place even in the analog world. After my stint of about 20 to 25 years in that industry, I started to step out only purely because my interests still lie close to advanced R&D and very unique projects. So I stepped out of my comfort zone and went to work for a venture capital firm for a few years. And I learned a lot about just clean energy, advanced medical devices, electronics, and a few other areas. And I did my tour there and ended up running a small chip foundry and got my exit from there and then joined one of the largest companies. So jumped from a very, very small foundry to the largest foundry, to TSMC. So I was at TSMC running their specialty area business development function for a few years. And some of my previous customers from TSMC, after I left TSMC, called me to join their startup called Novia. And of course, this was right in the middle of COVID, where I pretty much worked from home right through my stint at Novia until we got acquired by Qualcomm. So I can say with a lot of pride that my biggest exit was in the time where I didn't own a badge and didn't go to work. So it was a very, very interesting time. Of course, fast forward, COVID's gone past and the world started to open up a little bit. So after I got the exit, joined Qualcomm, I spent a year at Qualcomm and I just moved on. And most of my current activities have been in advising startups, engaging in consulting roles or board roles, and also spending a little bit of time in shaping India's semiconductor manufacturing strategy. So I've been at this for the last 2 or 3 years. So I have a few thoughts on that as we go along.
One of the things I find interesting in your career, Sagar, is you've worked in a variety of industries. AMD, who would have thought AMD would be the reigning king today? And it has gone through its ups and downs. You worked in venture capital. Novia got acquired even before you got your badge. And what is the key to success in these companies? How do you choose which company or what kind of role you play in it?
Good question, though. So, Shankar, I think it comes down to the individual. Individual's risk appetite is one thing, and kind of the boredom you have in a current job. When you're there for 2 generations of a technology development cycle, the first generation you learn a lot. You almost learn 70-80% of what's new because you've never done this before. A second iteration of that, you may learn 20% because you've done this thing all over again. By the time the third thing comes along, you're just pushing the cart. You're really not trying to innovate and do. So you see my roles over my career, every 4 or 5 years, I tend to move on to something else. So that's kind of how my journey has been. If you look at my last 35 years, I've done about 9 companies. In a way by design, but in a way by how I see what's evolving in my current role, right? So that's kind of what makes me move from one place to the other. I have to constantly do something new in what I engage with. So,
And what I find interesting is that people change roles for sure. I've done that, but to be able to change fields from foundry work to venture capital to design and complete start to end design in the case of Novia, and now in angel investing and supporting companies turnarounds. How did you make those transitions? That's not common.
it's not, but I'll tell you a little secret since you asked me about it. I'll tell you what I tend to do in any role that I engage with, any company, be it small, be it a corporate role. There is a certain job function that's defined for you. I tend to spend a little bit of time away from that job function on both ends. So it's for me, it's learning. It's trying to influence a design end or a product and test end when I'm in the foundry side. So you peripherally try to go. And then once I influence the design end, you start to move up the chain to understand business development and marketing side. So I spend in any role I'm trying to go beyond the borders, beyond the scope for the guardrails of what the job is defined. So I tend to explore those opportunities. And then every once in a while, an opportunity comes along that has maybe 30 or 40% foundry and 30 or 40% business development. I jump onto that function. So for example, my role at TSMC is not in wafer fab and not in R&D. It was in business development, right? So those are the kind of transitions I made. And I felt comfortable doing that because you don't have to be an expert at doing that. You have to understand enough to be dangerous and work with the right people to start to put strategies together. So that's kind of what's helped me. Yeah.
In short, you became comfortable with discomfort or comfortable with moving out of your comfort zone.
Absolutely. Yeah,
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, we are in this humongous transition with the semiconductor supply chain. Everybody's trying to consolidate and localize a lot of the work. You can't just be, outsourcing everything to the other side of the world anymore. What will it take for the United States to be successful? Just throwing $50 billion is not going to solve it. And likewise, on the other end of the world, what will it take for India to be successful? I want to hear your wisdom because I remember one of the CFOs of a major company said, Sagar could make this work. So I want to know what secret sauce you have, Sagar.
Well, it's not secret sauce. I'll tell you a little bit about, of course, as you know, the US lost the manufacturing edge, except for Intel and some of the analog players. The bulk of the advanced manufacturing, purely due to fabless companies coming in and the foundry ecosystem really developing well. I think all through the 90s and 2000, the US has pretty much lost their manufacturing edge. Now they're trying to catch up of over 20 years of a mismatch. What the CHIPS Act is doing is a good start. It's only a start, Shankar. I think it just needs that kind of monies to be deployed almost every year or every other year for generations to come. Because it's not a one-time act that says, yeah, Intel's going to build the next factory or Micron's going to do something in the US or TSMC or Samsung's going to come in. One factory will not cut it. TSMC's got over 10 to 12 factories sitting outside Taiwan. What will one factory do? It's got to be a much longer term engagement, right? So that's one piece of it. The second piece is really the technical labor, technology piece and the labor piece, right? Running a factory requires 2 sets of people, the technology experts. The college is not spurning out device technologies these days. Everyone's going into coding. And of course, with Chat GPT and AI, it's a different discussion. You have enough coding resources available just purely because of the productivity gains you're going to get there. So I think the CHIPS Act and the monies that are coming in is the start. This has to continue for generations to come. The kind of monies we're talking about, 50 to 100 billion, it should not stop there. If US, and then the other piece is investing in the education and the supply of engineers that have to come in. That is an important aspect as well. So how do you encourage research labs, universities to start to feed in the pipeline of engineers required from us, right? So those are important aspects as well. By the way, there's another piece to it too. Setting only fabs in the US or foundries is not enough. Advanced packaging and test also have to come in, and those projects are not attempted to be on the forefront yet, but hopefully in the years to come, that was going to tighten the supply chain. Today, it doesn't make sense to make the wafers here and ship them off to Asia again to do your assembly and test and ship them to your end customers. So that's one piece of it. The second piece is the comment about India you made. The timing for the India initiative is right. The geopolitical pressures that are going on and everything else that's out there. Having India, of course, being the most populous country in the world helps, because you've got a very large growing population of kids that between 20s and 40s. This is the highest in the world. So how do you tap into a STEM-based education that has rich culture towards technology come through together? So that's a piece. So the ecosystem for India needs to have many legs to stand on, right? Not just doling out incentives is not good enough. So you've got to have a very, very strong business case to set up what business you want to do. How do you want to fill those factories? That's one piece of it. The second thing is you've got to need a strong India-centric powerhouse. I'm talking about the likes of Tata's or Reliance or somebody else who can be the anchor to pull this project together. The third piece is you need an operating partner who knows how to set up and run wafer fabs. And the fourth and the most important piece is to have a foundry partner who has incentives to set up factories in India and see that grow as well. If it doesn't have to be a partner who's going to put tens and thousands of people out in India, but technology licensing. You know how folks design on technologies that you have. You've got to be foundry compatible. There's a reason why you have to be TSMC compatible or Samsung compatible or Intel compatible. If those technologies are not there, you're not going to get a breadth of products that are going to come on those technologies. So time to market is important. So getting a foundry partner is a piece. So these 3 or 4 pieces have to come together. And that's kind of the reason why India is struggling a little bit today. If you look at these incentives and these plans were announced over a year ago, nearly 2 years ago, and they haven't picked a single player yet. This is the reason not all 4 elements have come together in a single player. I think time will tell. They'll muddle their way through. They'll get 1 or 2 projects approved in the next 6 months to a year, I'm hoping.
Let me switch to your venture capital roles and your angel roles. Again, you worked in multiple spaces. How do you decide which company to invest in, how to guide them, and how to make them successful? What is the role of a venture capitalist in today's fast-changing markets, whether it's semiconductors or it's generative AI? How do you work with these fast-changing markets?
You know, you have to have a passion and figure which spaces you want to play in. I pick areas that I focus and invest or consult or advise in areas where I can contribute. In areas, for example, if it's pure software, I don't play. I just don't understand that field. I just don't understand where things are moving, right? So, but if it's in an area where I can look at medical devices, you have some background, both from your side as well as your family investment side in that area as well. But medical devices is an area where if there's electronics as part of it, very, very interesting in the space. As folks are beginning to as the age demographics of people are living longer, you're going to see a lot of health care issues of second order that will come through. How do you have better quality of life? How do you get, and how does electronics aid in some of those areas? Is one aspect of where my interests lie. The second area is I still think there is so much untapped resource in the areas of power management and analog. Now, if you look at it, for every digital device, there's a host of analog circuitry around. You've got to communicate to the real world. It's not just zeros and ones. It's a host of analog circuitry, be it sensors, be it touch, be it power management, right? Be it any grayscale matter. That I think it's important. So if you look at those two and look at areas like clean energy and areas where, so trends that are big and bold and opportunities that feed into that is what excites me. Big trends, but is there an opportunity? You can't solve big problems being alone. There's an ecosystem that's required to solve big problems. But if you can feed in your ideas and get into those spaces, that's what interests me. And that's kind of my scope. And others may have other areas of scope. So having said all this, you can put a lot of energy into it, understand it, but that's only part of the problem. There is a bit of luck that gets involved in investing in companies. There's a reason why venture capital firms only get 80% of the investments don't go anywhere. Only 20% take them somewhere. 10% are major home runs, and the others don't quite get there. Even with their entire bench strength of analysts, they don't quite get there. So I think that's important, right? So to understand where you want to play and which passion has to drive this, Shankar. It can't just be generically, I'm going to go and spend time on this. You got to have interest in it. You got to have deep engagements and deep learning. You want to read about this stuff and understand the space as much as you can.
As you clearly pointed out, the real world is analog, but there has been too much talk about the strides in digital technology. Most of my career was in digital, but most of the problems we encountered from the very first Pentium chip to the more recent chips have been in analog areas.
Right.
What will it take for these IoT companies to be successful? Because we don't have enough expertise in analog today. And every single device that talks to machines has to have an analog component, as you said. Where do you think the bottleneck is and what can be done about it?
Well, I think simplistically put, and you're seeing some of these emerging trends come out. The bottleneck necessarily doesn't have to be solved on a single piece of silicon. And I want to enter a subject that's getting a lot more attention these days, is what's called chiplet strategy. So you don't necessarily have to put it all on one chip, one gigantic chip, and pull power, pull IOs, pull your digital circuitry, your processors, and all of them in one. It just gets very complex. You don't have a technology regime that manages all of that. I think getting into a chiplet strategy where you can start to pull various chips or various blocks that come together, I think that would be, and let's say we're at a very early stage. You know, the couple of companies are very advanced in this area, but they're advanced in the high-end compute. We haven't taken this to edge IoT and some of the applications that are coming in. They'll start to become a lot popular. For example, you could have multiple layers of die stacked on top of each other. So vertical stacking would be as important as horizontal connectivity on a substrate or in a package. So you see some of that come through as well. So I think understanding a combination of process and packaging solutions will come together. The collaboration today has been very discrete. Once your fab processing is done, you ship it across to packaging, somebody else worries about it. But that collaboration will start to come together because you have to now vertically integrate and package die. So that area, those areas, I see a lot of emergence in some of the advancements we're talking about.
Very exciting. We definitely live in a very exciting world. Speaking of which, Novia's success in being acquired by Qualcomm even before tape out was just astounding. What do you think? First, what made something like Novia successful at a high level, and why is it that people are hesitant to get into making these big chips? What will it take in future to have teams that create these big chips, whether it's CPUs, GPUs? What in your opinion makes them successful?
Novia raised a lot of money. You can't get there with $5 or $10 million. These are very, very complex chips, very large chips, and you're taking on the best of breed in positioning your product. So when you look at the numbers, Novia had raised something over almost $250 million. That's not small sum. how many companies you can say today have raised that kind of money before a chip comes out or before they get acquired? So I think having a very, very strong team, having a pedigree of founders and architects who understand, who've done this many generations over and understand this, I think is very important. So that's one piece of it. The second thing is you have to have a market opportunity that drives for better performance or enhanced chips. And you look at where Qualcomm is on their path, on the Snapdragon path. I think Novia puts them on a different curve. Novia technologies will enable a much higher performance, much better, much richer engagement, and much more functionality per chip as compared to the baseline of what for example, Qualcomm had. And that's probably what Qualcomm saw in Novia, even though the products were not out yet with Novia by the time the acquisition happened. But that's the path they're on. All the three co-founders, as far as I know, are very well seated within Qualcomm and making these technologies and products happen.
I see this whole new breed of accelerators for AI, accelerators for data. We need so much more technology. If all the dreams that we are watching with ChatGPT and all the new technologies have to be successful, if generative AI is to be successful, on the platform side, on the hardware side, do you think we have the wherewithal to be able to do that? What will it take to make these teams successful?
Well, it's a combination and collaborative effort. Like I said, it's not going to be just hardware folks sitting in a corner doing it, be it in India or be it here. I think it's a combination of hardware, firmware, software. All of these folks have to play together. And there's another piece of analog and digital coming together. So there's multi-dimensional challenges. And the big players will absolutely have the resources to make it happen. I'm talking about the likes of NVIDIA and the others. But there are opportunities for the small folks to play in, but they cannot play in the big in the big market, because it requires over hundreds of millions of dollars to get a product like that to market. So I'm a little concerned that some of the investments and capital that flows into these kind of companies, with the economics of what's going on today, will be kind of curtailed. If you look at kind of what's going to happen, what I see is going to happen, the late Series B, Series C companies will likely struggle because they need the next chunk of capital to get product scaled up, right? And the early stage, so in times like this, the very early stage companies will thrive. Companies will start to form coming out of, in areas like this. AI itself will create thousands of companies. I don't know if all of them will survive, but that's the chaos, that's the hype we are in. We'll form a lot of companies, 2 or 3 of them will come through, maybe a handful of them will come through, and the energy will start to build around it. There could be M&As happening, there could be acquisitions, there could be IPOs going on. But I think we're in a good state because 2024, 2025 are touted to be better years than the last couple of years. So I think there's enough energy and momentum being built in the ecosystem. So I'm personally very bullish on the startup ecosystem as we go through. So.
And speaking of the startup ecosystem, I found something very curious. You got into investing in silicon. In fact, you were one of the early people at Silicon Catalyst at a time when nobody was investing in silicon. Nobody was investing in semiconductors. What made you do so? And tell us a little bit about how you have progressed and Silicon Catalyst has progressed in terms of incubating and nurturing semiconductor and chip companies and IP companies.
Yeah, so thanks. So the Silicon Catalyst was formed independent of me, just to set the record straight. I happened to be involved from day one as an advisor to Silicon Catalyst. It was exciting enough for me because there was no one semiconductor-centric incubator or accelerator around. There's no one around. Right? Everybody pretty much had walked away from it. We had semblance of semiconductor investments in maybe 2 or 3 VCs, as you know, and the rest of them were moved on to app-based AI. I mean, not AI, other kinds of areas. AI is just more recent, but there are other kinds of, enterprise software, other kinds of investments that have gone in. And semiconductors took a lot, for good reason. The investments are a lot higher, the returns took a lot longer. So having an incubator that's centric, Bay Area centric, Silicon Valley centric, and it has an ecosystem of really of experts who either retired or near retirement coming together and helping this ecosystem thrive. And with very strong partners like TSMC and the other ecosystem of EDA partners and others, have taken this wave forward. And if you look at it, it started when the market was really down and started to move up. If you look at when Silicon Catalyst started 2013, 2014 timeframe, market was pretty strong, but the investments were going in non-silicon areas. And startups were not thriving to the point where they were not getting funded. So they were starting small, they got acquired too early, or they just died too early, right? So the risk appetite was not there. That's a good time to form these startups. If you look at it even today, in times like this, it's when startups thrive and form. So as a result, fast forward 6-7 years, look at where Silicon Catalyst is today. They've got nearly 100 companies in their portfolio. Some of them have graduated, right? I don't think there are many that have actually folded, which is a phenomenal record. If you look at a true VC setup, 80% of the companies don't make it. And Silicon Catalyst, over 80% of the companies are still around. So it
is amazing. It is amazing. And the kind of technologies they are working on is truly amazing, from battery technologies to IP to real silicon to IoTs. I have no doubt in my mind that the advisory group is also tremendous.
I was going to say that. That advisory group and the wealth of experience, right from business, marketing to technology to operations to EDA to tools to design. I mean, the entire ecosystem is covered pretty well in the advisory group. So.
And indeed, I'm grateful that you introduced me to Silicon Catalyst. There are a lot of people who are confused these days. The opportunities seem to be a lot, but internships are few. So what advice do you have for people who are sitting on the edge and trying to figure out, should I get into hardware? Should I get into software? Should I get into low code, no code, AI? How should somebody go about creating their careers? And what does it take? Because this is not the same old industry we got into some 30 years ago.
So I think there will be silicon around for a long time. It may not be in the form that we saw 20 years ago. It's quite not in the form that we see today. In the future, it could be quite different. As you know, Moore's law is kind of slowing down, even though they're saying the Moore's law is still around. But the rate of progress in Moore's law has gone. What used to be every 2 or 3 year cycle is now every 4 or 5 years when you start to think about doubling your number of transistors. So I think technology will still evolve. It may not be in a single piece of silicon. So being involved in hybrid technologies and architectures, I think would be very relevant. But there's a lot of movement of stuff from the cloud to the edge. As you get to 5G, 6G and start to adoption, you'll get a lot more processing powers. The compute densities, even though it's on a one piece of silicon, it doesn't happen. When you start to integrate various pieces of silicon coming together on not necessarily a monolithic chip, that advancements will start to come through. So the collaboration with design, technology, fab, packaging would be of quite a bit relevant. So I think understanding cross-functionally those areas, I think would be very beneficial, rather than just trying to focus on, hey, I'm a device guy, I'm only going to do device-centric stuff. But I think being more collaborative in those areas will drive a lot of emergence of applications and products coming up.
I find it very curious that you're now working on turnarounds. You see all these companies that are hurting, and you're helping them turn around. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So what we're doing is looking at opportunities of where companies are. It's a small fund that I'm involved with, actually. So where companies have a product developed, have customer engagements, are in early revenues, but are out of money. They don't have access to money. So you have to figure out how you can help these companies turn around, either by infusing the right amount of capital, getting them engaged with the right investment partners, and bringing on the right management talent, either it's in business development, marketing, or operations to structurally help them to dislodge from where they are. So you apply really first principles of what you've learned over time into specific areas where you can help. And we can't just take on any company that needs to turn around to go help. It's got to fit the mold of what market are they trying to address. It's one specific company, and without naming it, I can tell you they are really a very high-end SSD, but the performance, latency, all the metrics about their benchmarks are best in class. They're out of money, and they're trying to figure out what to do. So we're trying to structure this company and get involved and help the management team to get some capital infused to take products to market. So that's one opportunity. There are many such opportunities as well. So I've been involved in a couple of turnarounds, and these things not everyone hits. I've been involved in, like, for example, I've been involved in 6 companies. 4 of them didn't do well, but 2 of them did, right? So, and that's the kind of hit ratio you can get to. You can't be a winner in everything you touch, right? And there's only one Elon, right? So.
And
Yeah.
and Sagar, you worked in a variety of spaces, from the fab to the design houses to IP. You worked in venture capital. What is there any one thing that you did that you find the most exciting, which was probably the biggest growth spurt for you?
My biggest growth spurt was running a very, very small company myself. I was CEO of a fairly small foundry. I was involved directly in turning that profitable. Running a foundry in the Bay Area and making it profitable are 2 different things. So that was the most exciting part for me. We had many pieces that came together. There was the host, a large team that pulled this together. But that's what to me was a turning point, which literally took me to a level like a TSMC and to an exit like a Novia and to Qualcomm. So it came fairly late in my career. Until then, I was pretty much marching on the corporate ladder from a role to a bigger role in a corporate to a bigger role in a bigger corporate, and kept going. And then I jumped off, and the move to a venture capital is what triggered all that. So I got back into a small company environment and started thinking, invest big, think small, or the other way around, right? Invest small, think very big, right? Normally, in a large company, you don't take that many risks, right? So in a small company, it's just the opposite, right? So that kind of realigned my thought process a little bit. How can you do with what you got? What you got is exactly what you got. You can't just say, I needed twice the amount to get somewhere. You don't have that twice the amount. You got to get somewhere and then take the right steps, but you got to walk away from a lot of stuff you can't manage, right? So that's kind of the thought process that got me going in a small company thing. And then I took that thought process into a few other startups I went to, and they came out okay.
And I'm all excited about the future. Is there one technology, do you think, that's going to change the world going forward?
I think what comes out of AI, there's going to be a storm of the AI activity over the next 2 or 3 years. There are 2 or 3 things that are going to come out of it that's going to make productivity improvements that we've never seen before. In all areas, in all aspects of it. So the compute engine, the IoT, the compute at the edge, the ecosystem around the edge, and start to take stuff away from the cloud and start to manage it. And the applications in that area will grow a lot. And when I say applications, it could be in any sector you look at, be it in banking, be it in productivity, in areas like in chip design or coding, or so. When folks say, boy, are we short of engineers? I don't think we'll be that short of engineers, because the productivity gains is naturally going to fix some of these problems, right? So I'm excited about that part. But the area where I'm most excited about is medical devices. I think the enhancements there are yet to be realized. The quality of life and the quality of medical care and care that are at point care, that is going to be democratized, where most people get access to it. It's what I'm personally excited by. I've got a couple of areas where I'm focusing in, but those things stand out for me. Great. Great.
So again, to listeners here, I'm all excited about learning about new technologies. No one has a crystal ball, but we want to see it from different vantage points and see where we can contribute, we can learn, and how we can be a part of these ecosystems. So Sagar, it's amazing talking to you again, and we'll have to bring you back as you make progress in each of these areas, whether it's in the semiconductor ecosystem, the healthcare ecosystem, or the fab and the whole, the back end and the support systems around it. Thanks again. And anybody interested in discussing, please come by and talk to me, and we will have a lot of fun.
Thank you, Shankar. Always a pleasure to engage. Thank you.